Jim. My name is Joanna, and I'm interested to explore different career paths. So first, introduce yourself. What do you do, or what you used to do, and yeah.
Well, I'm James Kern. I'm 77, so I'm retired. But what I used to do is I was an aerospace engineer. And before that, I was a aviation person, I would say. I did almost everything in aviation except for fly. And then I started out as in the Air Force, as an Air Force technician on airplanes.
Mm-hmm.
And so my whole career was around aviation.
That's actually really cool. I've heard a lot of students in my school, they love like anything to do with aviation, and so I think it's a really interesting topic to explore, especially as a career. So what inspired you, or like when did you start like, oh, I want to do this part of my career?
Well, when I was growing up in 1957, the Russians launched the first satellite into around the Earth, Sputnik, and rocketry became the really big deal at the time. And as a young guy who was kind of naturally technical oriented, I got really interested in that. And so I got interested in anything to do with rocketry and aviation, its corollary, and the technical disciplines that follow that. So from an early age, I'm talking about 12, 13 years old, I was kind of what we'd call today first-class nerd. But I had a very strong interest in aviation and rocketry, especially space. And that's what drove me to go to various ways that I went.
That's really cool. So it's kind of like a mix of your passions and your interests, and what kind of was historically happening at that time. Right?
Yes, yeah.
That's cool.
It was a big deal at the time, as it is now too.
Mm-hmm.
With SpaceX and what SpaceX is doing, a lot of kids that were my age, are now the age I was back then, are getting real interested in aviation and space and that kind of thing. So I can kind of understand how they would get motivated for it.
Yeah. So for this profession, what is like the education and degree requirements?
Well, the degree requirements are pretty much anything in mechanical engineering or the sciences. Because one of the nice things about aviation and space is it uses just about all the technical sciences that there are. So if somebody's very interested in materials or electronics, especially electronics or software or flight or rocketry, then any discipline that supports that would be attractive to them. And one of the things that the young people I grew up with was pretty interesting was that we didn't all have the same interests, but we were all headed the same way. So I had friends that were really, really interested in electronic design. And then I had other friends who were very interested in chemistry, the development of rocket propellants and engine mechanics for aircraft. And then other people like me that were interested in mechanical structures and flight characteristics and all that. We all worked together, we all supported each other, and it worked out really well. So the general thing of being interested in technical development is what you need. It is what attracts people and also what they need to follow. But education-wise, you need to be interested in any kind of engineering. And that actually goes for any kind of engineering, not just aerospace. You have to be pretty much dedicated to an engineering degree and as much breadth as you can. So it's great to get like a mechanical engineering degree, but it's even better to get a mechanical engineering degree with a side in materials or chemistry or the various things that work with it. It makes you much more valuable, and it's also much more interesting.
Yeah. So other than what you talk about technical development, for this kind of engineering, do you need like teamwork or like any other kind of skill sets in order to be successful?
Well, that's a good question. I've always been a writer, so as a matter of fact, I was an engineering writer for a long time, And one of the most valuable skills that anybody in engineering can have is to be able to write. And you'd be surprised at how many people think that writing is for secretaries.
Yeah.
And that they don't need to be able to write, but being able to communicate and communicate clearly is vital to a successful engineering career. And the people that I know that are the top of the heap, the people that I always looked up to, were people that not only knew the technical business really well, but they knew how to tell people about it, both in talking and writing, and so they could communicate. So communication is really important. And the other thing is people skills. You know, the classic picture of a nerd is some guy who's in a lab all by himself, never talks to anybody. And there's people out there like that, but they're not the ones that do really well by and large. Being able to work with a team and being able to accommodate yourself to what a team needs to do and not just get your own way all the time is very important. And I've seen many people, I've seen some people at least, who had a lot of talent for good engineering, but their own personalities kind of got in the way of it because they wouldn't learn how to get along in a team environment. So good communication skills and good ability to work with other people, and maybe let your own ego not be the only driver of the ship is very important. But education-wise, you need to have the technical background on it. It just doesn't do, especially nowadays. When I was a kid, you could learn rocketry. You know, I was mainly in rocketry. I could learn what I needed to know to function in that environment in a couple of years and almost by myself. Nowadays, that just doesn't happen. You have to be part of a team, and you have to be really well versed in a lot of engineering areas. So for people that are really interested in engineering, you have to kind of live it for a long time.
Wow, that's a big misconception. I always thought like engineering is just like doing like technical stuff. I did not know you actually had to write. There's also writing to, is it like to pitch like your project?
Well, an engineer has to be able to tell his boss what he's doing. And if you say IR working, you know, that doesn't cut the mustard on that. And you have to sell things. Anybody in engineering has got to sell things to people. Maybe not dollars and cents like selling a car, but he's got to sell concepts and ideas. And to make those come across where people can understand them and work with them, you have to be able to communicate it, and you communicate it best in writing. One of the common pictures of engineer is we live by PowerPoint presentations. And I've done 500 or 600 page PowerPoint presentations to give to customers and things like that kind of stuff. And if you can't write well, communicate clearly and succinctly, then you just get into a mess and it doesn't work. So an engineer needs to be able to do that. Engineers also have to be able to tell other people what to do. When I was a development engineer, I would come up with a new something or other for airplanes, and it has to be tested. And so I've got to send it out to the laboratory. They have to know how to set it up. They have to test it. They have to know what's good and when to call me if it's a problem. And all those instructions have got to be written down. And if they're not written clearly and cleanly, they get all messed up out in the lab, and the next thing you know, they've broken it apart, and you don't know why, and it's a mess. So communication is really important. Can't stress it enough.
Yeah.
Especially since I spent years redoing engineering communications so that they made sense. Yeah, but it was good money.
So talking about money, how is like the salary, or like what's the initial salary or starting salary?
Oh yeah, well that's you need to talk to somebody younger. My first engineering job, I was making, I think it was $2.35 an hour. But this was back when $2.35 an hour was pretty good money.
Yeah.
You know, so it's generally above average, as I should say, to get your foot in the door and into engineering. Again, this, being able to write, being able to sell yourself in your resume so you can get your foot in the door is important. But nowadays, the junior engineers, when I retired, but that was 14 years ago, we're starting out at around 55,000 a year, I think. So I'm sure it's more than that now,
Yeah.
but it's competitive.
Oh.
If you're going into engineering, you can expect to get competitive. And the other thing that I have told some of the students, I used to teach a little bit too, is don't worry about how you get in, just get in. I've got in a number of companies where they just didn't need my services, they said. They only had jobs for like a junior development engineer, the kind of guy that does what other engineers tell him. So I said, okay, I'll do that. You get in the door, they get to know you, you get to know them, you get to find out what to do and how to get where you go. In no time at all, you're starting to do something that's a lot more lucrative. And the big mistake that I see some people make, I have three boys, and two of them made this mistake big time, is I'm really well educated. I'm going to start out making real big money and important in the company. I said, no, get in, sweep floors if you have to, but get in the company and then get to know people. Then you can do well. And so I guess the advice is, don't be too proud of yourself to take whatever's available. But then once you get in, apply yourself and learn what you need to know and how you need to contribute to do well, and you will. Because I never worked for a company that didn't appreciate people who were trying. So how much money? I don't know. I didn't even much care. I just needed. If somebody said, well, we're not going to pay you much of anything, but you get to work on this kind of rocket. Okay.
And it's because it's your passion.
Yeah,
like,
it's a passion.
You enjoy it.
Well, you have to look about money because I have to go home and tell my wife how much I'm making, and she's going to yell at me.
Yeah. So, over like your years of in this profession, have you encountered any challenges or obstacles?
Yes.
And how did you overcome them?
Sometimes you just have to work hard. I've worked many 48-hour days because, especially on government projects, you spend a year and a half developing something and it does what it goes as fast as it's supposed to go. And they suddenly come down and tell you, nope, that won't work, it's got to go twice as fast, and we're not changing the schedule when you're done. So there's been extreme pressures you get under to meet technical challenges in redesign and that kind of stuff. And so you have to be ready, to be a good engineer, you have to be ready and willing to do what it takes. And so it means long hours, it can mean a lot of ancillary work. You know, I was a senior engineer at a couple of places and I wound up sweeping the floors in the lab because the technicians are so busy testing my stuff they don't have time to clean up. So I do it. You know, that's part of being a team member, to do that kind of thing. And schedule pressure. In engineering, the three big things are technical, cost, and schedule. Technical is, does it do what it's supposed to do? Cost is, does it cost what it's supposed to cost? And schedule is it going to be ready when you said it would be ready? And any one of those three, if it changes, it can cause great pressures. Not just from customers, but from your own engineering organization. So I think we got off the track a little bit, but yeah, there's big pressures, and you just have to work your way through them. And sometimes in certain companies, in a really well-run aerospace company, if you get into a bad problem, they will find people to help you. And then so suddenly, I've been in a couple of cases where I have a team of about 3 or 4 engineers and we're doing something and we run into a major problem and no time to solve it. So suddenly I'm in charge of like 50 or 60 people that are trying to work around the clock. When that happens, you have to be able to deal with it. The people who are really successful deal with it. And the way they deal with it is they know how to communicate very clearly and very well. So it kind of circles back to you got to be able to communicate. And I don't know how many engineers that I've worked with that said, well, I don't need to know how to spell or construct a sentence. You know, geez, I make hardware. You know, no, it's not that way if you're going to be successful.
So we were on the topic of time management. You were kind of talking about like schedules, and so high schoolers really struggle with time management, especially when our schedules are really hectic. So any tips for time management?
Yes, in the old days, there was a thing called the 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. And it was a whole technique on how you organize yourself. And they had a little notebook, it was about 5 by 7 basically, and it had a page for every day of the year in it. And what successful people did was they wrote down on the facing page what they were doing that day, and on the next page what they had left to do and what the big issues were. And they organized that thing so that they always knew what they had done and what they were going to do and what their goals were for the next day, week, or month, and all that, and then live by that thing religiously. Now, me being kind of a slow learner and a little pig-headed, it took me a few years to realize that that's the right way to work. And so organization is everything. Being able to schedule yourself so that you can meet the schedule that you're working to when you're in your work environment, and to organize your to-dos, the things that are important to you, and prioritize those things in a way that makes sense. It's easy to prioritize, well, I'm going to have ice cream first and then I'm going to eat my steak, but you got to do what really matters in the right way. So yes, learning to organize, learning to document yourself, what you did and what you are going to do and what your own personal schedule is, are key to managing yourself. And the other thing is to learn how to fit into other people's schedules. One of the ways that I dealt with bosses, especially bosses that were difficult, was to figure out what's important to them, what their schedule was for themselves, what's really important to them to meet whatever the goal is, if it's technical, schedule, or cost, and then find ways to fit in with that to help them. And man, does that make you a popular person, because you're actually helping and not just butting heads with the boss all the time too. But again, it's a way of organizing yourself to work with people and to work efficiently by yourself. And then another thing is that, and I struggled with this one, is you've got to learn to put the stuff that you really love to do but isn't pertinent to what you're supposed to be doing, put it aside and do it when you get a chance. It can be hard to do that. Like I played music for a while, and the temptation was to go home and just pick up the guitar and play until I had to go to sleep, but I couldn't do that. I had a proposal that's due. So you have to put the thing down and get it up. And some people get good at doing that and disciplining themselves, and some don't. And again, that's a success thing. It works for here. Even in this organization, everybody wants something. But what's really important and what's really our focus, and then if you keep that front and center and get it done, and then take care of all the little side things for friends and all that kind of stuff too, as you're able to, it's much more effective.
Let's shift gears a little bit. So you said you're retired already, right? And so when did you retire? Why? And like how that's been for you?
Okay. Well, now here's where your spouse comes in. I wanted to retire a long time ago because I had plenty of money. The really interesting projects, the big shoot the moon type projects, were kind of on the wane. There weren't so many of them. And so I thought, it'd be good to retire and do something else. Well, my wife said, no, 2 more years. So we played the 2 more years game for about 10 years. And finally, the company I worked for came down and said, we're changing our whole retirement scheme. And anybody retires after such and such a date is going to have to follow the new program. And people that retire on or before the other date get to follow the old program, which was a nice retirement check and lots of benefits. So then the matter kind of went out of our hands, and so I just retired in. But I swear that if they hadn't come along and done that, I'd probably still be working.
Wow.
So that kind of plays to another thing too. There's an old story, an old wives' tale in engineering, especially aerospace engineering, that when you retire, you die 6 months later. And part of the reason for that is it was so common in our business. People get into a rut where their whole life is the engineering thing that they're doing, and that's all they know to do, and that's all they really want to do, and so they wind up passing away at their desk. It used to be a kind of a common thing, not so much anymore. So along that same line, I would say that a work-life balance is very important. You should be dedicated to your work, but you should be also dedicated to making sure that you lead a healthy lifestyle in many different ways too. So for me, because I retired when I did, I still had plenty of energy left, so then I could turn to doing something else like this.
So after you retired, is this the only thing you do, or
Oh,
do you do
no.
other stuff?
I did this before I retired. I used to do it on Sundays. In fact, that fellow that was in here, him and I used to drive around and deliver food boxes on Sundays in 118-degree heat. I don't know how we survived it. But then when I retired, I was able to work here more often. I still have to fit in with it at home. But then I went away for a few years and worked at the hospital. And so I've done something like this ever since before I retired. And that's a real healthy thing. It's good to be having a social life with people, and it's a good way to pay back. Because one of my lessons learned in life is that as I've gone all the way through life and taken care of myself, I haven't always been so conscious of all the people who help me in ways great and small, and sometimes not understood or appreciated. But there's always people that are out there doing something to help you. It's a good idea to pay them back. And so doing that, I think, helps personal satisfaction, and it helps just make you a better person to not just be a tech guy. Some of my tech friends would be mad about that. That's too bad.
So, any advice? You said a lot about engineering already, and a lot of good advice. Any last some things you can other things you can think of, or just in general for high school students?
Well, pay attention to your culture. Pay attention to your parents, because we tend to think, us technical guys especially, tend to think that we're really together in ourselves without being so conscious of all the things that go on around you and all the pressures on us. If somebody has a religion, they should be serious about it. If somebody has a motivation to do social work or charity work, then they should be serious about it. It's not an occasional thing. It's not something you should do if you don't have anything better to do. It ought to be an element in your life, just like everything else is an element in your life. And that pays such huge dividends to people who will take it seriously that it's definitely worth it. Makes you a better person. Sounds kind of corny, but it's absolutely true. Yep. My grandparents were always telling me that I was a smart young kid. Yeah, right. And so it took like 40 years to realize, well, they were exactly right.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your great insights. It was really helpful.
Well, I hope that helps something. Yeah. And there's kids out there that, I know some of them because I used to teach kids too, that really, really need somebody outside their own family to kind of give them advice and kind of lead them along. And I guess one final thing I might say is, there's a lot of people out there like that. You just have to look for them, find somebody who's a kindred spirit kind of thing, and then follow.
Yeah.
The worst thing that happens to people in general, I think, is to have somebody else set their life path for them. Their parents, almost always.
Yes.
And they don't know enough. I mean, what kid knows what they want to do when they grow up? And so they just kind of drift along with that kind of thing. And then it causes all kinds of problems for them later on when they have to adjust to it. Is learn as many different things as you can so that you can find your own path. And the other thing is, the majority of the people I know, and I'm a good example of it too, wound up in their professional career doing something different than what they went to college for.
Oh.
Because right now I'm mentoring a girl who's going to school up in NAU, and she's an outstanding student, really, really smart. She's in the wrong career field because she's doing what her daddy does, which is, it's fine, but she's not going to wind up doing that. I just know. But then, from a kid's point of view, don't feel too bad about the fact that, oh my God, I went through college and I did this, and now I want to do something completely different. Go do the thing that's completely different. The college you got taught you how to think. You can apply that skill in any kind of field. And don't be afraid to do what you need to do. Well, another thing too, is just as a general thing for any student, especially little kids in grade school, learn another language. Don't care what it is. Learn more than one language. That's my weakness is I'm involved with Chinese, Vietnamese, and French.
You know,
I don't speak any of them. I'm just a complete dolt when it comes to this thing. And it's because I don't have a lot of aptitude for languages, but when I was younger, I could pick them up. You know. But you don't get encouraged on that thing. Because a lot of kids go to school to get a job. You know, I want to get a job in auto mechanics. So I only go to school for auto mechanics. Everything else is off the subject and I don't care. So they come out and they really have a hard time.